This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by Vigilant Impact. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first and have engaged, servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, churchsafetyguys.com, and on the original Church Security app. Download it today. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
All right, welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and I'm joined on this fine broadcast by my co-host, Mike Scully.
How you doing, sir?
How's it going?
Good.
I'm good.
Good. Yeah.
I am good. Ready for another great week. Fun-filled and exciting. Excited. It's been a busy weekend. Sorry.
You know what? In this business,
busy weekend.
or in this ministry, I don't think it's ever not a busy weekend, given that that's kind of the height of it, if you will. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we're in that calm before the storm, the lull after VBS, and before back to school.
Yeah, and I think most or a lot of churches do like outreaches in October, and start kind of ramping up for the holidays for Thanksgiving and Christmas, where people usually attend church more. But that's kind of where we're at, because I think that in October, I think we're doing a big missions outreach at our church. So we're kind of getting ready for that. And see, it feels like a lot of times with church, that you bounce from, at least in church safety, you bounce from like one event to one event to another, and whatever happens in between, sometimes that can be good, or
well, if you're production, it's usually
bad.
Christmas and Easter, and you got the two big ones, and you're planning the play and the this and the that and the and that takes all year. So for us, it's smaller things, but they can have big risk, and they can have certainly a need to plan and get ahead of things. So
for sure. Well, if you just joined us, you haven't joined us in a while, or this is your first time, welcome. And feel free to list where you're listening from in your church. And we appreciate you spending time with us. And of course, we always appreciate getting your feedback, and quite a few of you folks will respond to us and message us through Facebook, and also our other social media platforms and the website. And we love hearing from you all. So if you ever have any questions, or if there's anything we can help you with, please feel free to reach out. Or if you have any subject matter that you're like, hey, I'm curious about this, and you guys haven't ever talked about that on your broadcast, then definitely let us know. Shoot us an email, because we our intent is to do this for all of you, for folks listening. So we like to try and rotate topics and talk about things throughout the year and get a hold of them. But if for some reason you're looking for a particular topic, you can always go to our website and sign up for our Patreon membership. We have a Patreon membership where all of the past 130 episodes are on there, and you can access all those and then support our ministry as well. So all of that comes back to helping other churches and supporting our ministry. So lots of great resources and lots of things available on our website. So make sure that if you need something or need a reference, make sure that you check out that website at churchsafetyguys.com. So but I had a special project that I started working on this week, and we our church decided to purchase a facility vehicle, and it's something that we've been working on for a while. And so my role with safety and security, and then also facility, I help take care of some of the parking lot and different things like that, even though I'm 100% a volunteer. But I do a lot of different things like that, and moving away to a church plant, I've kind of stepped back from some of that. But the cool thing I found out is that we're getting a new vehicle, and I was asked to help outfit that as a safety vehicle as well. So it was like a multi-purpose thing that the church decided to invest in and help folks, so we can have more dedicated surveillance out in the parking lot and more of a presence. So that's one of the things that I've been working on, outfitting that and trying to get that ready to go. So
vehicles seem to be the popular topic. I've seen a few posts this week about vehicles. I think I saw something out there about cameras for vehicles and dash cameras and things like that. So it's definitely a good topic to consider. Certainly something you want to any sort of equipment purchase that has anything to do with safety and security. You want to make sure you're reviewing your requirements, your must-haves, before you go out and get something, because you don't want to end up with a large purchase and realize it didn't actually meet many of the needs that you might have had because you didn't take the time to kind of cover those ahead of time. So always good to do some solid planning and understanding what are those needs before you go shopping.
For sure. And we had talked about purchasing. The church had a vehicle for a long time for really just plowing. And so then they came back and they said, at one point, I think it was last year, they came back and said, okay, if we use this as a multi-purpose vehicle, if we use it for safety and plowing, because you only plow maybe 2 or 3 months out of the year, they said, what would you like to see? And I said, well, if we use it for traffic control and all this stuff, here's my ideal situation. So I appreciated the fact that they asked and involved me, and it's actually a similar vehicle to what I drive. So they were like, it pretty much looks like your truck, so we're going to outfit it like your truck.
There you go.
So, but one of the things that they said, they're like, you plow all the time for the church. What would you like? And I said, well, I'd like something that's, at least like a 1 ton or, heavy duty. And of course, right now, those are, believe it or not, those are a little bit easier to find where we are, because people are trying to get smaller vehicles for fuel economy and stuff like that. But at the same time, we wanted something that was durable, that could last, people beating on it. And we started talking about, and again, this goes back to everything, but we started talking about doing a lot of the modifications to the vehicle in-house. And I kind of, when they asked me my opinion of that, I said, well, here's the thing, we're church. We don't we don't do vehicle installs. We
Right.
don't do this or that. So, let's take it to a body shop or mechanic or somebody that has the tools and the parts, because being that it's a church vehicle, this is something that people are going to beat the tar out of, because it's not theirs. So when we have volunteers jump in and use it, then, uh, that's going to be something that we just want it to be durable, and not have to worry about that. So I think it's gonna be in the shop for a couple of weeks with all that going on, but it'll be nice to have that. Yeah, somebody commented about plowing. We usually plow snow. Plow snow probably, I think last year it was like 3 or 4 times, but we put a plow on it. And yeah, because you live in Texas, jerk.
Whenever possible, it's zero. I look at, what I go back to, why I love moving here is because as hot as it is right now at over 100 degrees, I don't have to shovel it.
Wait, wait. I see those social media posts where you're exhausted because of the heat. So
Oh, it's
don't
hot.
pretend to like it all the time.
I don't have to shovel it. I'm sure it's I see one of our friends here in Texas is on here tonight too. I'm sure it's just as hot there for him. So,
Well, and here's the thing. I get to see that in 2 weeks, right? Because I'm
yep,
coming down to Dallas for the
get ready.
NOC SSM conference. I'm really looking forward to it. Honestly, we're gonna have a table, and that way, it'll certainly be interesting. Um, but I'm looking forward to it. So I'm sure that the weather will live up to my impression and hype of Dallas.
Yep. No, it's well. I mean, here's the
So
big difference: is your body is, your blood is different in adjusting for that climate. I mean, I noticed right off the bat is that we shifted over the course of time. I mean, initially it wasn't. We're out there swimming in 70 degrees, and it's great because we're from the Northeast, and then now it's like now we don't go swimming for anything below 90. So it's got to be 90
that's
degrees
crazy.
to go to the pool. But that's just how we've adjusted. So,
We went a few years ago. We took the kids down to Florida, to Orlando and Disney, and they really wanted to. We went over Christmas break, and Florida had like a cold snap, and they really wanted to go swimming. And we ended up saying, okay, if the temperature gets to 70 or above, then we'll take you into the pool, because otherwise it's too cold. And I think the last day we were there, a week, the last day it was like 69, and I'm like, and the kids are all like, but dad, yours says 69, that thermometer over there says 70. I'm like, fine, if you're gonna heckle me over 1 degree, go for it. And it was funny because I think they lasted like 10 minutes in the in the pool, and they were like, it's so cold. And that was a heated pool at Disney. So I'm like, yeah, but anyhow, your your mic is.
uh, 70 degrees is like the start of our fall.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure, but I'm looking forward to it. We still have tickets available for that, and if you're interested in coming by, we'd love to chat with you. They've got some great conference speakers there, and some really interesting topics. So I'm looking forward to it. Um, the church safety guys will have a table set up, so you're welcome to stop by, and we'd love to chat with you. And um,
I think today is the last day of the non-door pricing. So I
yeah,
think if I recall, today is the end of that. So if you have an interest, if you're in the area, if you can get to Dallas in a couple of weeks, that is now's the opportunity. I think I can't remember the exact pricing, but it's a significant deal if you purchase through today, and then it jumps up for door pricing. So that'd be big.
Yeah.
But if you do, stop by, say
It's
hi.
yeah, it's definitely worth it because the day's packed with some great speakers, and then just some great content. And like I said, I'm looking forward to it. We don't have I don't we don't have a speaking role per se with it. We're just there supporting it. Chuck and his wife, and they do a fantastic job supporting churches. And so this is the first year we're just trying to help them and work with them on it. And so it's, to me, I'm looking forward to it because most conferences I'm running around like a chicken with its head cut off. So it'll be nice to actually be able to fellowship with some folks and enjoy that. So,
Indeed.
but for this broadcast, we're going to talk about just some active shooter information and just be kind of casual about it. But we want to talk about some fallacies out there too, and just add some pointers for training. If you're maybe you're looking for a trainer, we seem to be getting a lot of requests lately from different churches where we've had folks ask, well, what's a good trainer? What do you look for? How do we navigate? Because it seems like, and I noticed today, it seems like even just in central Ohio, we've had probably in the last couple months, like 5 or 6 folks, new companies pop up, and some of the companies don't even show who the trainer is, who's doing the training, or their qualifications. Yep. And so we wanted to talk about that. And to do that today, we have none other, I don't have a drum roll yet, than our buddy Aaron Wesley Hanna with us from SHERPCO. So thanks for joining us on this broadcast, sir. It's always good to have you back.
You're welcome. If I would have known you didn't have a drum roll, I would have said no.
I know. That's why I didn't tell you.
How are you, Anna? How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We don't have the weather that is out in Texas, but
yep.
That might be a good thing. There might be too many people here that would melt.
I hear you.
Well,
good to have you on again.
We were down in Tennessee last weekend, and I started watching the news and seeing how people were like, "Oh my goodness, it's a heat wave, it's a pandemic," and I'm like, "What happened?" Like, I don't even remember. Like, growing up, my parents were always like, "Go stand in front of the hose. That's it."
Right.
Like, we didn't have air conditioning in our house or anything, and now I think my mom and dad have like a window unit in every room, but most of the houses in Mike can back me up on this. Most of the houses in New England, I don't think have central air, or the older ones anyway. So
nope, not many.
You just turn on the fan and pray for the best. The fan and the window unit. If your house isn't a colonial style that has a weird adaptation to the window. So
let's dive into the topic du jour here. It's certainly a hot topic. Certainly everybody seems to want to talk about it. But as you said, James, it seems like there's companies popping out of the woodwork, and everybody wants to be an active shooter trainer. I almost feel like it's like, hey, put in your papers to retire from one career, and all of a sudden it's instant church security trainer. And I'm like, wait, what? Okay. We've seen different things. You got folks that not only may not have the best credentials from a security training perspective, but honestly, there's also a gap there. You get folks that are coming into this world kind of going towards churches, and they have zero ministry experience, zero understanding of church operations and how that works. And so there's a mismatch. It's all about having the right kind of balance between ministry, leadership, and the skills to kind of handle that kind of first responder, immediate responder level set of duties.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I created my company was because um, so many times I would run into training, and the training would, it could be something as simple as CPR and AED. But when you started asking questions, they didn't really have good answers to them, right? They had like a Rolodex of the common questions and answers you're supposed to give, and they always sounded robotic. And most of the people, they picked up a book, they read it, and their expertise in the field is, whatever organization they work for gave them some training videos. That's how they taught themselves how to do it, and then now they're out in the field and they're teaching other people. And so I ran across that quite a bit, and then I started seeing companies just rolling out with safety and security training, and you can kind of spot them pretty easily because they're all kind of textbook, right? They follow the slides, and they don't. They play the videos, they follow the slides, and that's really all they do. There's no discussion, there's no dialogue, and the content isn't based off of experience, it's based off of whatever they had to do to become a trainer for the organization. And um, I saw that a lot with just the basic CPR first aid, and now I'm seeing it a lot again with the active shooter scenarios or the active aggressor scenarios, where people are just simply throwing that up there. They're reading, they're watching the videos Run, Hide, Fight, and they're taking notes, and then they turn them into slides, and then they say, "Hey, I'll teach you this." And
they reword it. They
Yeah.
they take Run, Hide, Fight and try to find synonyms and change it to something else and then claim it's their own. And all they're basically doing is teaching civilian response and not actually an elevated or safety security level team response.
Well, and I'm not going to lie, the training that I do for active aggressor, or active violence, as we call it, we do change the names of Run, Hide, Fight, and it's for a reason. And I explain that reason for people. I personally don't like the Run, Hide, Fight. It's been around for a long while, and it might have served its purpose in the beginning, but now it's becoming more of an outdated tactic. And there's been criticism of it for a long while because of how linear it can be. You run. If you can't do that, you hide. If you can't do that, you fight. The big sticking point for me was a lot of people that are my age or older, and some people that are younger, when they were told to hide, they were told to hide under a desk, or behind something. They were told to do this for tornado drills or hurricane drills, or if you get people old enough, in case other countries decided to bomb us, right? You still had those some people remembering those bombing drills, and
Cold War days.
yeah, right. And so people would hide under their desk, and we've seen over the years people still do that. They get this hide mentality. They'll hide behind fake trees that are in hallways. They'll hide behind pews. They'll hide underneath desks, and they just shut their eyes and hope and pray that nothing bad happens to them. And then the whole fight scenario of it. For a long while, we've been told not to fight ever since grade school. Don't fight. Don't fight with your friends. Don't fight with your brother or sister. Don't fight. So when people learn these types of scenarios, I hear a lot like, I don't want to fight somebody, even if my life's on the line. People don't want to fight someone. It's almost like those stories from the world wars where people are like, I know they're my enemy, but they're a person and I don't want to shoot them. And so we have to break people out of that mold of the run, hide, fight, and get them engaged in the process of saving their life and the life of other people.
Agreed. And the big difference I think there is versus the complacency that some have where they just end up freezing and doing nothing.
Right.
It's still laudable, and I think it's important to understand when something's dated and modifying it to drive the right behaviors. It's another thing to kind of, like I said, some of these trainers out there are just kind of boilerplate,
Right.
putting their own little spin on it and making it somewhat different. I know there's a comment out there specifically on Craze, and yes, it was founded in Texas, in kind of my backyard essentially here. But that's the civilian response. So I think the general is, hey, you're caught in a mall, you're caught in a theater, you're caught in a church. How do you as an individual respond? Versus, I think what we're going to be unpacking a little bit more here tonight is really if you're on a safety and security team, if you're the one looking out for this, if you're the one perhaps doing some additional training, seeking out additional training to advance those skills, how do you differentiate? How do you make that different? Or how do you grow in those skills to kind of put yourself somewhere between you're not a civilian who's now at least alert, you're not a first responder unless you actually are. And so what do you got to do to be that immediate responder until help arrives? And kind of do that. So there's a lot of different training available.
And I think his
Technical
mic
difficulties. Yep. We just froze for a second.
There you go. Yeah. You're back.
Good.
Fun times. We didn't catch the last part of what you were saying.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be able to be here with just James.
I love you too, Aaron.
Yeah. Feelings mutual, buddy.
All right. I think it's back. I think what we're saying is there's a lot of different parts of the training we could go into and kind of unpack. But why don't we go down the path of kind of some misnomers? I know we highlighted a little bit. I think one of the things I'll kind of open it up with is the idea that 90% of churches that go down the path of hiring somebody to do an active shooter training are probably not ready for an active shooter training. And I mean that because they're not necessarily covering other sorts of things that are more likely to happen. And is it good to do the training? Yes. But there's things that are important to do early on that are worth covering. And you covered a little bit, Aaron, there is AED, CPR, first aid, all the different things that you also do are sometimes more important for most churches than going off and hiring the shop who put a plaque on the wall and said we do active shooter training. That's kind of what I've seen. So I think it's really the first fallacy is churches biting off too much too early, putting money into a big active shooter training when they haven't covered the foundational items.
Yeah. And when we're talking about that, there's so many avenues where you could incorporate a basic active violence sort of training along with other things. So, most of mine come with Stop the Bleed. I teach people trauma first aid while I'm also teaching them the active violence scenarios. So they're getting more bang for their buck when you're doing it that way. But I would agree. A couple of points that I would like to make is one, you hit it right on the head, and it's the same terminology that I use. Is we want people to become immediate responders, regardless of the situation. It doesn't have to be active violence. If there's an emergency, we hope that somebody will step up and become an immediate responder. And we say that because on average, EMS response time is more than a couple minutes. And if you're talking about something like a life-threatening bleed, that could happen in 3 minutes, and which is the number one killer for people under the age of 44. So trauma is, I should say, not just necessarily bleeding, but the biggest death in trauma is massive hemorrhage. So someone being an immediate responder, they're buying that person's life time to survive. And that's really what I think is big for any when you're looking for any type of training, is that what you're being taught? Are you being taught how to preserve someone's life in order for more advanced responders to get there, or are you just being taught a set of skills and not really what to do with those set of skills? Because a lot of people can press on someone's chest, right? But getting someone to actually do that is a bigger ordeal. Because as you see, you can go to YouTube and find videos of people just standing by videotaping, sometimes letting people pass away. And there's no law against that. There's no law that says that you have to respond. But getting people to do something is big, and that immediate responder portion of it is large. Talking about whether or not churches are ready for it, I have a disclaimer at the beginning of my class that, you know, some of the things that you see might be, one, everything's sensitive in nature with these type of topics. But two, some of the things that you'll see might upset you, whether it be an open wound or the topics. And I've had people walk out of the class and say, you know, this is just too much for me. We did one class where it was specifically just the safety and security team, and it was for a business. And we had some people that were higher level swing by, and they're like, hey, what kind of training are you doing? And someone told them that, you know, it was active violence training. And they're like, oh man, I just don't even want to think about that. And, you know, it really depends on the setting.
Right.
When we're talking about churches, we hear a lot about two places when it comes to active violence situations. And we hear about schools and we hear about churches or houses of worship. Right? Those are the two big ones that we're constantly reminded are going on in this world. Statistically speaking, they're not the number one.
Right.
The number one is a business.
Yep.
In 2021, last year, there was only one incident at a house of worship. So out of the 61 incidences, there was one at a house of worship. Those are pretty low odds, right? But we look at some of these. We look at some of these that have happened, and they can be very devastating. There's a reason why they talk about churches and schools more often in the media, and why they pull on our heartstrings, because these are places that are not meant to house that type of evil. Right. There's not that, you're not supposed to have those types of things happening in those locations. So it's an innocence type deal, right? The kids are innocents. Right. What the church does is supposed to be benevolent towards all humanity. So for something that drastically evil to go in, you're going to get more viewers if you report on that compared to a business. Right. If a large warehouse organization that happens to be online and they have local warehouses around your where you live, if something was to happen there, you know, I could see all kinds of reactions, but it wouldn't be as impactful.
It may not even make the evening news because of the type of response. Okay, I mean, if it's in an office park, a warehouse park, the police response aren't necessarily noticed by the average public, which may not bubble up to the news reporter to then say, hey, let's go cover this. Now, any mass shooting, I think nowadays is getting some play, at least on a local level. They're trying to cover most things, at least from a narrative perspective. But you're right. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the threat is the threat. The risk is perhaps lower than it made out to be, and maybe that's another one, that there's a gap there. There's the idea that their churches are somehow in much more need of active shooter training necessarily than other places. Now, don't get me wrong. There's an idea of insurance policy might say, hey, you need to cover a certain degree of training with your staff so that they know how to respond, maybe a run, hide, fight. It's literally you're about mitigating your cost of your insurance.
Right.
That's a difference than, say, training your team or training your church, both as a civilian response or as a team response in a much deeper way. I think that's where it goes back to the idea of, yes, are there potentially houses of worship with violent things happening? Yes. Is it something where it's so big of an issue that you're needing the level of McDonald's and Burger King onslaught of trainers? I don't think so.
Right.
But that's what we're seeing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think I want to go back to something you had mentioned, you guys both talked about earlier, is incorporating like different scenarios over top of each other, like to best use your time. I want to go back to that for a second. And yesterday, for those of you in the Facebook group, I posted some pictures yesterday. I actually had
Take the
two
worst
churches
pictures of me, by the way.
I'm sorry. Yesterday I had two churches come together for some active shooter training with Aaron. He came out. And one of the things I really liked about it was, and we had a good chuckle, was that every once in a while when everybody wasn't expecting it, he would say, or the video that he was using would say, "Here, quick, put a tourniquet on. You've got 30 seconds and you've got this, do it on this extremity." And it pushed people. And I think that I was kind of surprised because I've never timed myself. I've never said, okay, here's a tourniquet, quick, put it on. But it was very revealing to the folks that were there to say, okay, this is something that you make the assumption that you know how to do, and it's a quick thing to do, and that shouldn't be a problem. But with muscle memory and with your adrenaline and everything else, trying to balance that out and practice that, that's just something so simple that if you're in the middle of doing any other type of training, you can very easily incorporate and say, hey, put a tourniquet on right now. Like, stop what you're doing. You got 10 seconds or 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and see where that person's proficiency is, because we all it's the same principle when we carry a firearm. We all like to think that we can make that shot, that we're skilled and we practice and everything. But the reality of it, and we talk about it all the time, is that you fall back to your level of training. And so if you've never taken that opportunity to use a tourniquet, then the reality is that you're probably not going to be as proficient with it. And I don't say that to criticize anybody that's listening, because I was sitting there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually did it in 15 seconds. That's fantastic.
Not the first time.
And then basically, yeah. Not the first time, but okay, by the third time I was proficient.
Yeah. Well, and that's the reason why we do it. And I say a lot of times is the idea is under 30 seconds for tourniquet application, even with entrapped limbs. And by the end of the course, my hope is you'll be much lower than that. And those types of scenarios work where we get these fallacies in our mind where we believe that we have it all figured out. And it's great to play those visualizations in our head. Because it can help us overcome things. But unless we put that into practice, we'll never know if what we have in our head is what will actually transpire outside of there. I love the businesses that are like, hey, we have an AED that's 3 minutes away, and I say, okay, I'm going to time you. This person needs it. Let's go. And 7, 8, 9 minutes later, they're back and they're breathing heavy, and it looks like they're about ready to be the second person with the heart attack. And so it's a huge eye opener. They're like, wow, I never realized that, that what we had in our mind was not the reality of it. And that's really what we need to look at with just all training in general, is what are the realities of the scenario. And when it comes to active shooter, other years have been different, right? Other years outside of 2021, there may have been more houses of worships that had an incident. And so, they're warranted. But I know a lot of people that have said in classes that the number one is either a school or a church, and it's not.
Yeah.
Now schools are high. I think last year, a place of education wasn't as high as what it typically is. I think it was actually on the lower end. I think it was like the second from the bottom. But schools typically overall on average rank pretty high. But most people are surprised to learn that it's a business. And then governments and open spaces like malls and whatnot are generally the top three places that you're going to run into. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, wow, okay. And then sometimes they're like, well, why are we even doing this training? So it's a valid question to ask, right? Now, one thing you're going to notice about a good trainer, though, is what they teach you can apply to several different things. Like in our courses, we do situational awareness. One
I think he froze.
Oh,
there you go. You're back.
Yeah. Okay. Because you guys all of a sudden cut out too. But there should be other aspects of it of the training that you can apply other places, like situational awareness. Parking lots are key to locations. If you look at Parkland, this kid walked through the parking lot with a bag that looks like it carries a long rifle in it, and he walked through the parking lot into a building that doesn't allow that type of thing, past 3 teachers before he opened fire. And so in order for someone to get into your facility, they have to come from somewhere. They don't just like magically teleport into your facility. And if they do, then you have a much bigger issue. And I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Because nothing we have in this world is going to help. But those parking lots, a lot of times, if something looks suspicious, then pay attention to it, right? Doesn't mean it's going to be an active shooter. Doesn't mean there's going to be active violence. It could be someone just acting weird in general. It could prevent a theft. It could prevent someone, casing the place. It could prevent a domestic issue. It could prevent a lot of things by that very act of just being aware of what's going on outside of the facility. And you'll be surprised how many places I go to, they're like, oh, we don't have anyone in the parking lots. Or they have people directing where to park and those types of scenarios. But those people, they're like, well, we never thought about having those people trained to spot irregularities. And I'm like, the more you have trained to spot things that are irregular in your everyday life, the better off you're going to be. Right. So the training itself should incorporate more than just the act of violence. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of is people that are like, oh, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do the run, hide, fight. And then they pull the FBI's video off their website, and that's what you watch. And then you pay them a few $100s. I don't think that's fair. To be honest with you. And I think that we need to pay attention to who we're hiring to do these types of things and what they're actually saying.
For sure. And to jump on that real quick, and then I'll throw it over to Mike, because I know you wanted to mention and comment on it. And I mentioned it at the beginning of the broadcast that it seems like we've had an influx of folks all of a sudden now, once again, back in the market, being church trainers and that sort of thing. And when I look at it, because we have churches reach out to us often just for the sake of saying, does this look like a valid company to actually have pay and do training? Because training is not cheap. And we know that, churches have limited budgets. And so what they have the budget for, or what they want to spend the money on, needs to be well invested in their folks and for that training. So this is just my take on it, but if you go to their website, if they have a valid website, anybody can put a website together, but I would say that you need to go to the about page, or definitely see who the instructor actually is specifically. and really just check out their criteria and qualifications. I saw actually two different websites in the past week. One of them said that they weren't going to post their qualifications because they didn't want to overwhelm someone. And the second one didn't say anything at all. It looked like there were no qualifications, no people listed, no background, no experience. It just said, "Hey, thanks for contacting us. We're happy to help you. Reach out." And I'm like, okay. So here's the thing: like we've had on the broadcast, we've had Colonel Grossman on, um, we've had all sorts of other trainers that are very well known. John Correa. Next week, I think we're going to try and have Ed Monk on as well. But if you go to all of their sites, they list their qualifications, and those qualifications may be impressive, they may be long, but it's an honest explanation, right? You click on the about, you go to their page, and if you wanted to hire Colonel Grossman for training, you go down and there's a list of all of his military trainings and his qualifications. So that's going to be the first thing that I would say is spend time with the website, because you can really learn a lot from just reading and diving into it. Otherwise, you're going to get a case of what I would call stolen valor. And that's that, what I could say, and I tease people about this all the time. Mike hears me, and I know Aaron's probably heard me a couple of times too, say, "Hey, I work for the government. I can't tell you what I do. Otherwise I'd have to kill you, or I'd have to do something like that."
Well, and no one's worried about that threat.
No one is. But here's the thing. Should I be concerned with OPSEC? Well, yes, I should, to an extent, because I don't get into the details of telling people this is my particular function for the, the US government. I will tell people what I do. There's no reason why I can't tell people what I do. So on that piece, though, the reason I say that is because I joke around and I'll say, well, I can't tell you because it's high class. I have a, certain level of classified access, all this other stuff. But the reality is, when you go and you get a trainer that is sitting there saying, I can't tell you my experience, I can't tell you what I've done or how I've done it. Really, that's just kind of that kind of comes to a place where I feel like it's a lot of stolen valor, because it's like the same thing where it's like, what, there is no reason in law enforcement why. Now, you could be working on projects. I understand that maybe you don't want all the details out there, but when you go to somebody's website, it should very clearly be able to state, okay, this is what I'm qualified to train in, and this is my experience.
Right. And there's so much out there too. I think some people act, I think, around the world of safety and security as if there is so much OPSEC and there is so much, oh my gosh, hush hush tactics and things like that you can't find 100 YouTube videos already talking about it. It's
right.
like this isn't. I mean, churches are not the CIA. They're not black ops. They're not contractors working overseas. They're not SWAT teams. They're all of these different misnomers. So the reality is that we train, like we said earlier, to be an immediate responder. That is response and prevention. Okay. And really the idea of being is that we're going to spend more of our time on the prevention side than we ever get to the response side. Active shooter is both prevention and response. But you see folks spending money on response and, can I train my team to clear a hallway? And I'm like, okay, you know what? Yes, in that 1% scenario, you might need that. But what about the 99%? Are you doing other things? Yes. Okay, great. Your team's armed. And if you're in that opportunity of that situation to actually fire your firearm and prevent something or stop something, you know what? Then praise God you were there. Praise God you had the training, and praise God you didn't freeze.
Well, yeah, and if you look at what the FBI puts out there for 2021, 61 incidents, 4 of them out of the 61 were stopped by civilians, and it kind of goes back to the scenario where I'm glad those people were there, right? But if you look at the percentage of how many people were in the right place at the right time to be able to prevent that or stop that threat, then it's a very, very small percentage. And there should be a lot more training done on prevention or being able to look at behavioral issues or look at the types of things that are red flags for someone that might become someone that wants to perform some sort of act of violence. We get into a scenario where we think, it's how they're painted, where these people just kind of, something just clicked in their mind and they decided to start hurting people. Mm-hmm. And typically it's months in advance. You see warning signs, and the classes, I talk about the Uvalde shooting and how the gentleman, the kid was on social media and it was alarming other students and they reported him on that social media platform. So it goes back to the see something, say something. And that's what they did. They thought they went to the appropriate authorities and they reported him for this type of behavior. And they thought that, the social media company would step in and either stop him from doing it anymore or, whatever, contact law enforcement or whatever. And it didn't play out that way. And so nobody ever reported it any further than that because they're like, hey, we already did what we needed to do. And so seeing the warning signs ahead of time and making sure people are doing the right steps to be prepared for that is a big portion of what people need to be trained in. It's not
right.
It's not. I hate when people come up and say, "Hey, can you teach me how to draw a weapon?" And that's what I want our active shooter training to be is firearm retention and doing the tactical side of clearing hallways and breaching doors and it's like that's not reality. Right. And that's what we need to really pay attention to is what reality is, and I hear it a lot every class. People are like, I ask them like how many deaths are acceptable, and I hear a lot of people say 0. And unfortunately 0 is the wrong number because in reality 0 is unattainable unless you stop the threat before it ever even happens. So that number, if an active violence situation does go off, is very likely not going to be 0. So what is the number that you want, and that's what you need to train for.
Yep. And I think it all comes back to also the different types of that threat. Where is that threat originating? What's the likelihood of it occurring? We come back to actually planning for the right type of training based on where your church is, the type of needs that you have. And frankly, I think sometimes is having an anti-bullying training for your kids' church is probably part of the active shooter mitigation, because the idea being is you don't want a culture that is going to allow a bully to thrive, because the bully, the person who's been bullied, could become the future aggressor. The person who was the bully could just keep ramping up and escalating until they become an aggressor. So I think the reality is there's things that we can do to identify, mitigate, prevent the threat right up front that we can train in. And then there's response level training, to your point, is once that first gunshot goes off, perhaps once there's already a body count, how are we responding? How are we addressing it? Is our staffing model set in such a way for our churches that we could respond to it in a relative manner? Not all of our churches have the luxury of a team of 5 to 7 people on per service plus. Right. Some have 2 people. Some have 1. And the reality is that training's going to look a lot different than these teams. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's still important to be thinking about always be training. Semper Disciplina, that's certainly something we say it a lot, but understand that it should be the right training, not just more training for the sake of training.
Yeah, and that's important because there was an article written about one of the Uvalde teachers coming out and saying that the active shooter training that they received was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was inappropriate for what actually really happened, and I see that a lot. I had a teacher in a class not too long ago, and they said, these are the things that we've been taught in our class, and they brought up the Uvalde shooting, and they said, it's my greatest fear that that's going to happen, and I'm not going to know what to do if they come in that classroom. And so because of that, a lot of our training, we teach people what they should do instead of just shutting the door, instead of turning off the lights and just hiding, how you can prepare yourself in that room in case the shooter does come in there, right? And maybe it's not even a shooter. Maybe it's just someone wielding a knife, or someone that has some sort of a pair of scissors. I mean, if that's your weapon of choice, hopefully you trained with it, man.
Well, I'm saying in that scenario though, is saying
right.
grab a pair of, if you're not armed, grab a pair of scissors, grab something.
Yeah.
Don't just wait and hide. I mean, I get the lockdown, locks light out of sight. Okay, that makes sense. Sounds good. But at the same point, prepare to respond. Prepare to defend yourself.
Well, and a lot of these, the teachers that I've talked to have said that their buildings are starting to get like automatic lockdowns on their doors. So if there is an active aggressor, they literally get locked into that room. But the problem is, as we saw in Uvalde, if the shooter's already in that room, the door gets locked,
yep.
then what do you do next, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do that we need to really take a good close look at, and really look at the information that we've gotten to. It's a hard topic, and we need to give that topic respect. But it's not a topic where I feel like, and I know a lot of other people feel like, we should be training people how to go in guns blazing, right? It's about immediate response, and it's about calculating how you respond in that situation, because all of them are going to be different. There's never going to be two that are going to be similar. They might have similarities, but not exactly 100% similar, right? So we need to train for that facility, that location, and I feel like prevention is more of an issue than the actual response side of things, right? Because I can't teach civilians how to respond appropriately, and it sounds weird, but I don't know how they're going to respond. I can only give them information until they've actually been into a situation like that. I don't know. You talked about the whole freeze thing. You have freeze, fight, and flight, and sometimes people freeze, and it's an involuntary reaction to assessing danger, and they have no control over their motor function. And I don't know if you're going to do that or not. I can only give you the tools, right? And hopefully that you use them and you train them and you can overcome that stress reaction.
I think it's we're going to go ahead and wrap up, but I think it's an important point to note, and we were talking about it before the broadcast about doing an assessment, and because oftentimes if you are a church and you've hired this company to do this and this company to do that, and then you've had all of this different training, sometimes it's easy to kind of forget where you're at in the whole scheme of things. And for a new instructor to come in, they have to take an assessment. They have to look at everything. They have to look at the building. And sometimes folks might get a little bit upset because that seems like extra work and another step. But the reality is, all three of us have done assessments at churches before where we're like, okay, you know what, how you handle something that like the methodology might be a little bit different, or where your church, like one of the things that I do is when I do an assessment of the church, I'll pull it up on Google Maps. And the first thing I do is I look at what are the roads around it? What are the highways? What's the infrastructure like? What are the, the municipal services, et cetera? Because if you're a building that's, 400 square feet, your response to any situation is going to be a little bit different, regardless of how many people you have, to a building that maybe only has 2,000 square feet. So in reality, having someone come in, having a trainer come in and spend that time and actually say, okay, you know what, let's step back. Let's look at the training you've had. Let's evaluate it. Let's do an assessment. Let's move forward. Oftentimes that's worth having someone do. And in fact, I mean, I had a church reach out to me from Indiana today saying, we started a team, but we want you to come out to look at what we're doing because we want to make sure we're on the right path and that we've thought about the right things and we're looking at the right things. So yeah, I mean, training is never ending. It doesn't have to be daunting. There's plenty of resources out there. I would say, we're a resource. Aaron, for those listening, what's your website if folks want to reach out to you?
Website's is SHERPCO.com, and don't look at my about page because I'm not on there right now. So we redesigned the website and we haven't got all the content swapped over to it yet. So my pretty photo is not there.
I can vouch for him, folks. So if you're looking for somebody to come in, he's a good guy and that's his website. I'll say that.
And I told James this earlier. Every training that I do, I want people to come out of there. They're different, and it doesn't matter if they come out different, good or bad, as long as they come out different. James had the pleasure of being there for one of the training. He's like, yeah, some of these guys, they're different now. And I'm like, hey, I did my job. It might be unorthodox, but I'll get you where you need to be.
Well, I think, and we were talking about this yesterday, that the reality is, over 20 years, we've seen the evolution of active shooter training. We've seen the evolution of first aid training. Initially a first aid training class was 32 hours, 32 to 36 hours. Now it's down to 4. And we've cut out the methodology of why do we do what we do? And I think some of that might not be necessary, but the reality is both of us, as we instruct, we like to tell people why something happens the way it does, not just here's how to fix this, like here's how to address it, here's the mechanics behind why this happens and why there should be a concern and an understanding. And I think as we move forward, I think we're going to circle back around to that, because with training as a whole, it's not like we have to capture people's attention so they learn and they understand, the whole capturing someone's attention so they learn in a modern technology, environment where it's like people have a certain level of focus and time where they focus on stuff. We have a small window to communicate how to do this. And the reality is we may not completely, you might not get or learn everything in that class, but if you can set yourself up for success and remember enough of a foundation so that when you do call 911, they can be like, hey, let's work you through this. Have you ever done CPR before? And then you're like, oh yeah, I remember that training I had with, Aaron on this day, and we were doing compressions or this person, and we were doing this and that. And yeah, I remember how to do it. Then you're really setting yourself up for success. Yeah, so
they probably don't remember my name. They probably just remember the big, bald, crazy guy. And that's probably what they remember.
That's fair.
I mean, you didn't know what to call me for years. You're just like that the bald guy.
Yeah.
So and then people look at me and be like, what's your name? And I don't even remember half the time. So
But anyhow, well, thanks for hanging out with us on this broadcast. It's always fun. We always love having you.
Well, it's always been a pleasure.
And your comedic relief.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the funny thing is I will tell people that I'm a failed comedian. Because but for whatever reason, my kids think I'm hilarious. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I feel like the movie Casino, like, oh, you think I'm funny, like haha funny or funny, right? Because I was taking my kid and his friend to school one time, and he was in the first grade, and he looked at me and goes, "Dad, why are you so funny?" And I'm like, I don't know how to take that. Like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, you're just funny. Why are you so funny? No one else is funny like you. I'm like, I don't know. I wish my wife thought I was that funny, but apparently my sense of humor is better for the younger generation than the older. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't respond to that. But look at the time. We're out of time. Yeah. So anyhow, but thanks for joining us. If you're listening at home again, thanks for hanging out with us for the last hour. And next week, like I said, we're going to be on, and we're going to try and have Ed Monk on listening. And then the following week, actually, Mike and I will be down in Dallas and hanging out at the conference. So swing by. You don't want to miss us. And we'll be happy to hang out and talk with you. So until next time, have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. God bless.
This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry, and semper disciplina. Always be training. Have a blessed week.